All right, well, my editing skills are crap, but can the same be said for Edge of Tomorrow? Stick around and find out. Movie review. All right. I don't know where that was going. Nowhere. Hi, I'm Peter Franson from ChristianGeekCentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions with an uncut review of Edge of Tomorrow. Let's take a look at the IMDb.com synopsis. It reads, an alien race has hit the Earth in an unrelenting assault, unbeatable by any military unit in the world. Major William Cage, Tom Cruise, is an officer who has never seen a day of combat when he is unceremoniously dropped into what amounts to a suicide mission. Killed within minutes, Cage now finds himself inexplicably thrown into a time loop, forcing him to live out the same brutal combat over and over, fighting and dying again and again. But with each battle, Cage becomes able to engage the adversaries with increasing skill, alongside Special Forces warrior Rita Vrataski, played by Emily Blunt. And as Cage and Vrataski take the fight to the aliens, each repeated encounter gets them one step closer to defeating the enemy. All right, so this is a very simple story. You know, if you wanted to see Groundhog Day, but like with kind of sci-fi war action, here you go, Edge of Tomorrow. If that's all you needed to hear, go see it. It's a movie that's about characters and situations that they are thrown into and how they react to them. It's about creative problem solving with a time travel gimmick. And even though I say it's about characters, it's not, I suppose it's character driven, but it's not like something that like really involved me with the characters throughout the entire experience. It's got a sense of lightness to it and a sense of just kind of, you know, it takes itself seriously, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be really emotionally involved necessarily. That said, there are also some great humorous moments revolving around his ability to replay the same day over and over again. Similar in some ways to the kind of things that you would have seen in Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, which if you haven't seen, oh my gosh, you've got to see that movie. But anyway, in fact, I would recommend seeing that before this one. Just because Groundhog Day did it first. So there's some great humorous moments, and the movie, despite not really being engaging on an emotional level and not having a story that's like just impeccably designed, it is interesting throughout because you're just wondering, okay, how is he going to approach this situation in light of this time travel gimmick that he has access to? The limits and the vulnerability of Cage, the character played by Tom Cruise, are very pronounced in the first half. He is an unlikely hero. I appreciate where he starts off in this movie because he's unlike most Tom Cruise sci-fi action movies. If you think of Oblivion or Minority Report, where he's this very kind of capable person and he's very courageous just from the get-go. He's this kind of guy, you know. In this one, he's not. He starts out as someone that could possibly be identified as a coward. I don't know if I would go that far, but he is certainly not interested at all in getting into combat and life-threatening situations, and he is certainly fairly self-centered, you might say, and is content to kind of look good in front of other people, but not actually get his hands dirty with hard work and self-sacrifice. And so to see him starting in that place is just it was a nice change of pace. I assumed I would be going into this movie and be like, well, he's going to be Tom Cruise sci-fi action hero. He's going to be the same guy we've seen in every movie. And he does get there. He does become that, at some point, as the synopsis basically gives away. And as you can tell probably from just the scene in the trailers, he does gain capability as the movie goes on. And there's a certain point where he crosses that threshold. It's like, okay, there he is, Tom Cruise, sci-fi action hero. Same guy we've seen in a million movies that he's done. But it's nice at least that he starts out in a different place, and we get to see kind of his progression into that kind of character. Near the end, though, he becomes almost a superhero, Not that he has, like, superhuman abilities, like super strength or speed or stuff like that, but he becomes, even setting aside the time travel thing, he becomes so capable that he only seems to be vulnerable when it's convenient to the story and where they want to take the story. And when, you see him, like, toward the end, and like in the last, I want to say 15 minutes, there's this tumble that he takes. I'll put it that way. I won't go into more details. I like to be as spoiler free as possible, but there's a significant tumble that he takes. And earlier in the movie, he was getting hurt badly, a lot more easily, from things that were far less severe than this tumble that he takes near the end. And I'm like, really? You're just going to get up and walk away, you know? So that kind of thing really drains the tension out of an action movie like this. And so for me, the tension was completely removed from the climax of the movie. There's no butterfly effect in this movie. You know, if you've seen the movie Butterfly Effect, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, that's the idea that when you travel back in time and and kind of live a part of your life again, if you do anything differently, if the slightest thing is different, then that will have ripple effects that will drastically change other things. But you would notice in this movie, as you see in some time travel movies, that this guy could go back, and this was the same. The same was true in Groundhog Day, but that's a comedy, and so I didn't demand as much. And also that the time travel concept in there was not linked to sci-fi, to science, as it is in this movie. It was just a fantasy kind of scenario. And so I didn't demand that the rules make sense and stuff like that. When it's sci-fi and when they tell you kind of a little bit at least of where this ability comes from, and they do explain that in the movie, I expect a little bit more in terms of the rules and for them to make sense. And so Cage would go back in time and he would do things that were significantly different. But yet the people around him were still kind of saying a lot of the same things and behaving in a lot of the same ways. So there didn't seem to be an effect on people around him like you would expect if you're going to take like a butterfly effect approach to how you view time travel. But if you want to, you know, loosen up a little bit on that and just kind of say, oh, all these people, they just naturally gravitate toward approaching this day the same way every time. You know, if you can, you know, give yourself over to that, then it's fine, you know. Yeah, let's see here. Despite this kind of like, okay, that I'm not sure that all makes sense. The movie is still very interesting until the end. I wasn't emotionally like, oh my gosh, you know, but I was really interested. I was like, okay, well, what are they going to do next? How are they going to solve this problem? So like I said earlier, it's a movie about how characters react to situations, given this time travel gimmick, and then also how they creatively solve problems given this time travel gimmick. And the limitations of it. The performances, let's talk about that a little bit. Okay, Tom Cruise, I don't know if you recognize this guy. He's been in a few movies. He's incapable and vulnerable, as I said at the beginning of the movie. I felt his fear early on. He was very relatable. That was very nice. Like I said, it does change by halfway through, and he's the unrelatable hero again, which is a bit unfortunate. But it's probably, of the action movies I've seen him in the last 5 years, or maybe close to 10 years, the one that I felt like I could relate to him the most in. Emily Blunt implies some subtext in her part, but not as much as I think she could have if given the chance. They just weren't interested in taking the time for that kind of thing in this movie, I don't think. She wasn't given much to work with in terms of the script, in terms of who her character was, but she still does a fine job. She's still interesting. She's still, you know, decently relatable. I think some more time given to character development and just the emotional drama in general, you know, that would naturally come out of, I think, the circumstances these characters are thrown into would have significantly helped the film. Okay, but let's talk about visual effects and stunts. That's why you see this movie. Oh my gosh, this was a great visual ride. A major highlight of this movie was just the visuals in general and the stunts. They're in these giant exoskeletons, which are like almost to the first Iron Man prototype suit. I mean, and I'm looking at these, I'm seeing them move around in them because they're not completely covered. You know, you can see, as you've seen in the trailers, you can see their faces and a lot of their bodies, you know, running around in these, you know, big exoskeletons. And I'm like, how are they doing this? You know, I usually have a pretty good eye for picking out CG. It's harder for me when it's artificial stuff, like inorganic stuff, you know, like solid objects that aren't supposed to have organic flexibility, as is the case with these exoskeletons. I think CG really does that kind of thing well, and it does it really well in this movie if it's CG. I think it has to be CG. I mean, I'm looking at these things and I'm like, if they put an actor in that, they're not going to be able to run around with the kind of dexterity and agility that they're displaying in this movie. But at the same time, they looked so physical. They looked like they were real. My guess is that it's somehow a combination of practical costume elements and then filled in with some CGI bits to fill out the look. But man, they did a great job with those things. The mimics, that's what they call the aliens in this movie, Very cool design. Now they definitely move like CGI, but I mean, when it comes to weird aliens that are inorganic, I give some flexibility. I'm like, okay, well they're clearly CGI, but whatever. I'll run with it. They what helped compensate for that was just how they behaved in the story. I mean, they were like these frenetic. They were kind of like Sentinels from the Matrix movies, except on steroids and speed. I mean, they were all over the place, and they were, creepy to look at appropriately, but also the way they moved was just so unpredictable, and you couldn't get a sense of where their balance was, and they were just like skittering all over the place and just limbs everywhere. They were really cool, and they were very threatening in terms of how they behaved, how fast they moved, and how unpredictable their movement was. Really enjoyable to watch. There were also some really cool single shot stunts, and by that I mean a whole sequence of stunt going on in a single shot without cutting away to like a different effect, so that a different angle, so that they could take their time doing the shots, and kind of like tricking you into thinking you've seen something that you really haven't. No, there are some really great little stunts in this movie that are done in a single shot, and there are also some stunts that I think, man, I'm not sure. I think they must have started out with like a digital Tom Cruise, and then at some point in the shot transition over to the real Tom Cruise. We've seen that in movies like since, I want to say, the first Blade movie, when it was cool, and I liked it, but it was pretty obvious. Okay, CG there, and now he's Wesley Snipes. In this one, maybe if I watched it again, but watching, I was like, I honestly don't know how they're doing that. I honestly don't know if you told me that was Tom Cruise, starting at this point and doing all this crazy stuff, and then tumbling and landing here, I would say, wow, he must have had a really good day. I could almost believe that. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, that has to be a digital Tom Cruise starting out, transitioning into the physical Tom Cruise. But, they do such a great job with it, is what I'm saying, that I cannot wait to get this movie on Blu-ray, and I hope they have extensive behind-the-scenes features that show how they put these shots together, because it's really enjoyable to watch. When you can't tell how they're doing effects like that, it makes what's going to happen in the action sequence less predictable. You know what I mean? Like in horror movies or something, when you can tell, oh, the background looks a little funny. I think something weird and special effecty is about to happen, And they did it, when you can overcome those barriers, then it makes the shot, and therefore the action, and therefore the story, more unpredictable. So it might sound like, oh, Pater's just really into visual effects and, making sure they look good. But when they're done well, they serve the story. They serve your involvement in the action. And they did a great job in this movie of serving the action and the story. Okay, so let's talk about relevance. Is there anything in this movie that might lead you to think about worthwhile matters of any kind, or to talk about those kinds of things after you've experienced it? There are things in there that you could probably pick out, but I don't think the movie lends itself to that. Some examples, the nature of time, of course. I don't, time. Do you have a static view of time, or do you have like a flexible view of time? Or I mean, it's yeah. I mean, if you're into those kinds of like deeper questions, like what is the nature of time, and then in light of that, where does God land in all of that? Is God, if you have a static view of time, then God is outside of time, and time is just, it's on this plane and it's fixed, and that's what's going to happen. If you have like I can't remember what the proper terminology is, but if you have like a loose view of time, like if time is in motion and it's being created, events are being created, and as they unfold, and there is only the present that exists. The static view of time says that all these points in time exist all at the same time, and God sees them and is in touch with them in a sense, at all times. Whereas the non-static view of time is that time only exists in the moment, and that what's past doesn't exist anymore. You couldn't travel back to it, and you couldn't travel to the future. It makes time travel basically impossible. So, there's questions like that, questions about the nature of consciousness, like how is someone in a movie like this able to go back in time and still retain their memories of the previous day that they lived when they've now changed that day did not happen anymore, So what is the nature of consciousness? Is it independent of time, or is our human consciousness tied irrevocably to time, unavoidably to time. And then there's the question, I suppose, of fate. Are certain things just fated to happen, or can they be changed? That would be more probably along the static view of time. Questions of predestination and stuff like that. But all of these things are only there if you're really super duper hardcore into talking and thinking about this stuff, and you just want to find something to talk about. The movie does not try to do that. The movie does not try to raise any philosophical questions about the nature of time, the nature of consciousness, the nature of fate. I don't think. Maybe fate. There is kind of one recurring line about fate, but I really don't think so. It doesn't lend itself to that at all. So this is just a movie to have a good time with, and just kind of like escape a little bit into this crazy scenario for a little while. In summary, I would say that despite its flaws, it scratches some nerd itches seriously well. This is definitely a must-buy for me when it comes out on Blu-ray. It's rated PG-13 for intense sequences of sci-fi action and violence, language, and brief suggestive material. I give it a quality score of 9.0 out of 10, so it definitely could have been better. There were some things, that really could have just, knocked it out of the park, but as it is, a very enjoyable experience. 9.0 out of 10, and a relevant score of 5.0 out of 10. Please do like, share, and subscribe, or I may just get really depressed and you'll just never hear from me again. No, that's probably not going to happen. Also, leave comments below about what you liked or what you'd like to see, except for better editing or intro music. I don't think that's going to happen. And if you want more info about our scoring system and tons of other content and community, visit ChristianGeekCentral.com. I hope you'll come, and join us there soon as we continue to geek out and seek the truth.